Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. A little bit of debate show. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We've got the Trump campaign to talk about, debate tonight, debate potentially with President Trump moving forward. Who knows what's going to happen? We also have Glenn Greenwald on to talk about a new piece that he has written about sort of the Democratic reaction to Trump getting COVID and how it doesn't necessarily fit with some of the past things that they've said about him. But we do want to start with the big vice presidential debate tonight. Kamala Harris versus Mike Pence. What can we expect?
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be real fireworks right now. Okay, so we have a little bit of exclusive polling that we can share with you. Let's throw that up there on the screen. So Hill Harris X poll. Who do you think will win the vice presidential debate scheduled for October 7th? Slight majority say Kamala Harris. 52 and 48% say Vice President Mike Pence.
Everyone's just sort of like, whatever.
Don't know, don't particularly care. And if you don't care, I don't blame you because I don't particularly care either. But I guess it's important. And we were talking about this. They're so boring. They're both particularly conventional. But hey, look, I mean, Mike Pence is one heartbeat away from the presidency. Kamala Harris could be
more relevant now than ever.
More relevant now than ever. Kamala Harris very well could be president of the United States because of Joe Biden. I mean, he's an old man. So who knows? I mean, we should pay attention. We should hear what they have to say. Unfortunately, the more that we do, we realize how little they have to say, particularly Kamala.
These are both very practiced talking point style politicians, I would say, which I think is part of why there isn't a whole lot of anticipation for tonight. I do think people are a little bit interested to see how Kamala performs at this point because her debate performance in the Democratic primary were very uneven. The first debate, she was phenomenal. I mean, that little girl is me moment. But even beyond that, she was on it. She was ready to go. She was well prepared. And she wasn't taking incoming. And that's always been the thing for her. She's very strong when she can play that role of the prosecutor, when she can be practiced and prepared and kind of control the pace and the narrative. When you're in a one-on-one debate like this, that's not really possible. On the other hand, you're not going to get anything out of the ordinary from Mike Pence. You pretty much know he's very easy to prepare for. You know what he's going to throw at you. You know what the talking points are going to be. You're going to get a lot of you're the Trojan horse for the socialist left, and why did you support Medicare for all then, and why don't you now? Which actually I want to hear her answer to, how she responds to that. But even as there, I would say, is not a whole lot of anticipation for tonight, it is actually important because Kamala Harris, by being chosen to be Joe Biden's vice president, is very likely to be the next leader of the Democratic Party. Joe hasn't said that he's only going to serve for one term, but I think that's entirely possible, if not likely, just given his advanced age. And so she would certainly be the very likely next Democratic nominee. What does that look like? Is she ready to go toe-to-toe, one-on-one in these types of debates? How does she handle herself under pressure? That is an interesting storyline. And then on the right, and this is something that you've talked a lot about, Saagar, it's going to be kind of a free-for-all for the post-Trump Republican Party. Mike Pence very much has a claim to potentially being the next nominee there, the next leader there. He has a certain constituency himself. He's always up till, becoming Trump's vice president was this very standard issue, conventional Republican type politician. You could see him taking the mantle of Trumpism and turning it into just standard issue zombie Reaganism type Republicanism. But he certainly has a potential claim to being the future of the Republican Party.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, he has as good of a grasp and as claim to the future of MAGA as anybody else. I mean, I don't think he really particularly would live up to much of it. And I doubt look, maybe Trump is loyal to him and gives him his blessing. I have a lot of doubts about that actually happening. But you found this, which I love, which Kamala was on the cover of Elle magazine in just the most glowing. I mean, we were just talking about this. It's so annoying whenever the politicians get the celebrity treatment.
Find it disgusting. And I don't care whether it's a politician I like or don't like or whatever. These are not your friends and your idols. These are people who are competing for power.
Yes.
And part of why, again, it is interesting, one of the aspects of tonight is that it will be interesting is Kamala's faced very little in the way of actually tough questioning. And this piece from Elle magazine is a perfect example. And look, I know it's Elle. They're not hard-hitting, whatever. You got to at least ask her a few challenging questions. But it was a total puff piece. The headline is, Kamala Harris is fueled by optimism. The woman who could be vice president on the fight for justice and freedom she's been waging since birth. And that was the tone of all of the question was like, what was it like growing up and instantly being brought into the movement? She gives all these very like vague Pete Buttigieg answers that mean basically nothing. And it's like, Jesus Christ, here we are in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of economic fallout. We're going to cover that more in the show. All of these massive major issues. And these are the questions, not one single tough question about anything that directly affects people's lives. It drives me bonkers. But that's been the tone of the Kamala Harris coverage from the beginning. She has benefited from that like celebrity type coverage. Elizabeth Warren, of course, you remember the selfie lines and all of that. Stacey Abrams also would always get these puff pieces. And then Mike Pence, I feel like, has just been sort of ignored. Like no one really pays attention to him. No one ever asks him really tough questions either. He's always just on whatever the Trump talking point is. So you rarely get anything interesting out of him.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that's probably what we're going to see tonight. Like that, very likely we're going to get some identity politics on steroids and some nice like Reagan politics stuff. And this is probably going to be a draw.
Something for both of us to hate.
Yeah, there's a lot to hate there. And look, we wanted to play for you. There is a chance Kamala, look, like you said, Pence is actually a pretty predictable guy. You almost are certain exactly what he's going to have
to say. He's going to have a steady, solid type performance.
He will have a steady performance, but you also can predict what he's going to have to say, which means maybe Kamala Harris can have some prepared barbs. This was her best moment from the presidential Democratic debates earlier this year. Let's take a listen.
To hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Okay. I mean, it was an effective attack at the time.
He took on water from that attack.
He took on water from it, and then all of a sudden she backtracked, and she's like, oh, actually, Joe and I are friends now. They're all in together, you know, whatever. Nobody really talks about it.
And she instantly started undermining it with, like, you know, not only the Instagram, but then we're going to sell T-shirts immediately and have those up. And then they asked her, like, well, what do you actually think about busing? And she's basically like, well, I agree with Joe. So that kind of killed that. But in terms of a performance, she had a very effective performance because she was able to really super over prepare. And so, look, I think she'll be pretty strong because I think Pence is an easy person to prepare against. And because bottom line is the Democrats are in a much stronger position on the issues than the Republicans have put themselves in this fight. Like en masse, they're on the right side. On just taking coronavirus seriously, they're on the right side. So it's a much easier landscape for Kamala ultimately to be able to navigate than Mike Pence tonight.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, I mean, we shouldn't sleep on Pence either. I mean, Pence, like you said, very effective at just sticking to the talkers.
He's solid.
He's very solid. Thinking back to the 2016 debates, we were like, are there any highlights that we can play? We were like, no, not really. But there were a few moments. The man has his charm. Let's take a listen.
Yesterday, Mr. Trump said he brilliantly used the laws to pay as little tax as legally possible. Does that seem fair to you?
Well, first, let me say I appreciated the "you're hired, you're fired" thing, Senator. You used that a whole lot, and I think your running mate used a lot of pre-done lines. Look, what you all just heard out there is more taxes, $2 trillion in more spending, more deficits, more debt, more government. And if you think that's all working, then you look at the other side of the table. I mean, the truth of the matter is the policies of this administration, which Hillary Clinton and Senator King want to continue, have run this economy into a ditch. We're in the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression.
15 million new jobs.
There are millions more people living in poverty today than the day that Barack Obama, with Hillary Clinton at his side,
and the poverty
stepped
level
into the Oval
and the median
Office.
income
We have the lowest,
improved dramatically between 2014 and 2015.
Honestly, Senator, you can roll out the numbers and the sunny side, but I got to tell you, people in Scranton, no different. People in Fort Wayne, Indiana, no different. I mean, this economy is struggling. And the answer to this economy is not more taxes.
But it's not to give away tax relief to the folks at the top.
So there you go. I mean, kind of a zombie
Tim Kaine
Reagan
was
stuff.
So annoying in that
Tim Kaine was awful. But I mean, the line about Scranton, Fort Wayne, not bad.
It's funny. Actually, that clip is kind of like a perfect emblematic of Mike Pence clip because he winds up with the you're going to spend too much money and raise taxes, the standard issue Republican talking point, and then somehow rolls it into the Trump talking points about Scranton. It's also funny because this time around they're kind of in the reverse position of being no, look at the stock market, which isn't doing that great at this exact moment, but everything's great, everything's fine, which was the bad position that Hillary was in or chose to took last time around of trying to convince people that they were doing better than they actually were feeling and living in their lives. So, look, I think he will be hard to ruffle, right? I think you're not going to score any knockout blows against Mike Pence. He's on the script. He's very practiced. He's very confident in his way, solid. And so I think that's what you're likely to get tonight.
I cover the White House with Pence. You could throw anything in that man. He would squint and he would give you a perfect answer.
Right out of the briefing book.
Right out of the book.
He will reading it verbatim.
Every single time. I don't think either of them is going to crack into the other. And look, I mean, the public doesn't care at the end of the day about vice presidential debates. Well, I'm sure we'll bring the ratings.
Honest about that.
If you thought the ratings are bad for the last one, just wait and see what comes in this time. But speaking of the next debate, Vice President Biden making some news yesterday saying he does not necessarily want to debate Trump if Trump is still active with coronavirus on the date of October 15th, I believe is when it's scheduled. Let's take a listen to what he said.
I'm looking forward to being able to debate him, but I just hope all the protocols are followed, what's necessary at the time.
Do you feel safe in the same room as somebody who still may have COVID?
Well, I think if he still has COVID, we shouldn't have a debate.
Should not.
In a debate, I think, by the way, I think we're going to have to follow very strict guidelines. Too many people have been infected, and it's a very serious problem. And so I'll be guided by the guidelines of the Cleveland Clinic and what the docs say the right thing to do, if and when he shows up for debate.
I mean, I would not want to debate someone who had active COVID either. So I think it's a pretty fair position that he's taking out there.
I mean, the president's team saying he's going to be there on October 15th. He's going to be healthy. We'll see. Apparently, they're considering having it outside. So there you go. And tonight, apparently, I'm not sure if it's been 100% confirmed yet. Kamala's team had requested plexiglass in between the two. I don't know if Pence's team had agreed to that
I think the last that I saw was that the plexiglass was going to be in place if you were really super hyped up about whether there was going to be plexiglass or not ultimately. The funny thing is that for so long, the Trump team was building up the debates, we're going to crush Biden at the debates. That's when we're going to turn everything around. Trump, because not really because Biden had an amazing performance, he didn't, but because Trump was so terrible in the first debate, he really took a significant hit in the polls. I mean, all the polling that has come out since then hasn't shown a massive shift, but a couple point shift consistently towards Joe Biden. We got another national poll out, Reuters Ipsos yesterday, that has Biden up by 12. Of course, we covered the CNN poll, which is an outlier for sure, that had Biden up by 16. But what we've seen in the averages is it's moved from about 7-point national lead to Biden to an 8 or 9 point national lead for Biden. So what they had been predicting all along, which is that Biden would crumble in the debates, actually the first debate worked out great for Joe. So I think he probably is feeling pretty confident about if he does have to take on Trump at a second or third debate here.
Yeah, it generally seems that way. I mean, the debate worked out for Trump. We should remember last time around, nobody got a significant polling bump, Hillary or Trump, out of the last debates. Neither in particular after all three. And we should also, I just want to keep in mind, it is October 7th, 4 years to the day since the Access Hollywood tape out.
So crazy.
A lot of can change, at that day. A lot of people thought he was toast. So just keep that in mind. It's been 4 years since that happened. Since WikiLeaks, I guess almost exactly 4 years to the day since WikiLeaks started. So Comey and all that other stuff.
But 4 million people have already voted.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's a different deal. And the race has been so consistent and stable. And rather than making any moves that you would think would get him back in the race, as we're going to discuss later in the show, Trump just seems to be content to blow himself up. I mean, pulling out of stimulus talks when people are struggling is politically completely insane,
Yeah,
which is what he did yesterday. Obviously, his handling of his own coronavirus situation, the fact that there's mass super spreader situation going on throughout the White House, that it's not like they're taking that more seriously at all. So, yes, anything could happen. Let's stipulate that. But the trends do not look good whatsoever for him.
All right.
All right, we're going to tell you what's on our radar. So that's next.